Hi, today I'm really pleased that I'm joined by Alex McPherson from Ignition Law, the founder of Ignition Law. Alex has very kindly given up some of his time this afternoon to talk to us a little bit about his journey into entrepreneurship and where Ignition has become the force that it is today. So Alex, thank you ever so much for joining us today.
Pleasure, Rob. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, no problem, no problem. So actually, I will give some context for those of you. And Alex and I actually went to school together, so it's been lovely to follow his journey many years on and see how well he's done, and follow his law firm Ignition Law. But again, part of this conversation today, Alex, is that as we both know that things aren't always plain sailing. There's you've got a really successful journey, but there's a few bumps on the road sometimes as well that we have to overcome. So I think it's probably quite interesting for people to hear about that.
Absolutely.
So, should we start by? Do you mind giving a bit of an intro into your background, Alex, and who
Yeah,
you
with
are
pleasure.
and your company?
Yeah, and it's also been great to see what you and Natalie have been building and the award you won recently, and absolutely fantastic what you're doing at Jigsaw.
Thank you,
Um,
thank you.
yeah. So my background was at Paul Grammar as well, and then and I'd always wanted to be a lawyer, and um trained in the city at a couple of large firms, Hogan Lovells and Freshfields, and was there for quite a few years, and just had a real love of small business, and was working doing larger mergers and acquisitions in the mid market, and really loved actually how you kind of get to know clients, founders. Probably a lot of similarities with Jigsaw's clients, where you actually make a bit more of a difference. You get much more
Sure.
direct feedback, and it's a lot more fulfilling. So I'd fallen in love with small businesses, startups and scale ups, and we set up 2015, where there was a little bit of a gap in the market for a law firm that entirely focused on entrepreneurs, scale up, owner managed businesses. And fortuitously, rather than it being a strategy at the time, there was this incredible pool of talented lawyers who'd maybe left law around having families, where it was, the assumption was back then 80-hour weeks or nothing. And actually, there were incredible people that had a huge amount to contribute. And actually, for entrepreneurs, having your documents back in the evening around children is sort of how they're working and setting up their businesses. So that led us on to probably becoming more of a values-led law firm, where we're almost a B Corp, have a three-quarter female senior leadership team, and actually try and work with small businesses where you have shared values and a sense of ethics.
Fantastic, fantastic. I mean, that in itself quite an inspirational start to this in terms of you setting up, and I would imagine that you've left quite a very good job in the city, very strong job. Um, what made you then want to take that leap of faith? Because that's a huge thing, going and leaving a corporate job, that you're doing very good at and you've done really well to achieve, and then start Ignition. I mean, that's a huge leap of faith.
Yeah, I think so. We still do a huge amount of work with Hogan Lovells, and are really very collegiate with a lot of city firms where
Mm,
they work with larger clients. And I think for me personally, it was a sense of having a bit more autonomy. And I loved what I did. I loved the firm. I loved some of the secondments and things, but it was actually being a bigger cog in a smaller machine, and having
mm.
a little bit of more autonomy, which is a common link to happiness. A lot of
Sure,
people
sure.
who are struggling in maybe in their careers are actually feeling like they lack a sense of autonomy and ability to make
Mm,
decisions and have impact and change. So I knew that was easy. I created a business plan and thought, actually, if it failed, or it wasn't going to fail and achieve nothing, it would fail in the sense of maybe not being able to step laterally financially within a year or two. Was a plan to work all hours and try and not take too much of a pay cut, albeit stepping off a treadmill to kind of keep moving
sure.
north. And that led on to a really fulfilling start. My wife was saying, we talked about it earlier, and she said, you did it for lifestyle reasons. That's been a fail, because it's still not it's still not the lifestyle, but doing what you love and having a bit of autonomy, I think, and a sense of personal growth and really
Yeah.
feeling alive were the motivators.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. So what have been the key enjoyment aspects of, I've got my own. I can appreciate that from starting a business, but what have you enjoyed about setting up and seeing Ignition will grow as it has?
I think personal growth and development, and really living a little bit more in the present, where you have that, you know, autonomy. I think that's really a huge motivator for me personally.
Yeah.
We tend to work with clients that we really like and feel aligned with, and not having that pressure to work with clients that you maybe don't feel aligned values on. In law, you have all sorts of regulatory obligations where you can't, you need to commit and work very seriously for clients, but it's clients quite rightly call us out on our values and service delivery, and there is a sense when you're having initial conversations that actually it needs to be a good fit. And I think that sense of actually really making a difference and growing, developing personally, and that really has been one of the things that's most enjoyable. And I think probably the other thing actually is seeing people grow and develop. You know, so there's
Sure.
people that started with us 8-9 years ago who are just doing amazing things, and their roles have changed and evolved, and they've grown in confidence, and that genuinely is one of the most fulfilling things.
Fantastic. No, I completely agree. Seeing that, I mean, I can sort of say from our side that working recruitment, you know, I've got clients that have become candidates several times over and that I've known for 20 years now, and seeing their journey go from, let's say, a HR administrator now being a group HR director, it is fantastic, isn't it? Seeing that growth in people and seeing how people develop and enhance their careers, etc. Whether it's for you internally, whether it's seeing people externally, I completely agree. So that's I guess, and it's really nice to focus on the positives. But look, we've all had probably failures and things that we need to improve upon over the years, or things we think, oh my goodness. So can you shed light if there has been any sort of real impacts or failures on route that you've had to pick yourself up and dust yourself off from?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, to start with, you, especially with small businesses, you know, there's a sort of sense of awkwardness about tricky conversations and
Sure.
giving feedback, people maybe not being happy with things. And I think 2015, 2016, I was sort of trying to brush it all under the carpet, stiff up a lip, and feel quite awkward having tricky conversations. I think that was a big failure in the sense of not having difficult conversations earlier
Right.
leads to things building up. And then also, if you've not, and I certainly hadn't, if you've not started to work on the skills and personal growth to kind of have tricky conversations earlier on, you kind of by definition maybe lack those skills a little bit when the bubble has grown and bursts later.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I certainly wasn't very good at dealing with that sort of stuff where you've got contentious situations. And so I think that's definitely was one of my failures, and that led to the end of 2015 actually doing some coaching and kind of learning and starting to build leadership skills, which, you know, in many industries no one expressly teaches you. And so that was a big failure, starting to realize that it wasn't other people's fault. It was me starting to try and grow and develop, learning to listen a lot more rather than going straight in. I think the other big failing was often where there was a little bit of pressure or people not happy, making decisions quickly under pressure just to kind of make a decision and move on would often lead to quite poor decisions and a kind of loss of respect from people that you're working with. Whereas, whilst I'm sure the same with Jigsaw and your clients, you need to be quick and decisive and move on, actually being brave enough to say, look, I'm going to just sleep on this and reflect on it, is certainly was a failing earlier that I think I would hope is less common nowadays.
Do you know what? It's really enlightening and refreshing to hear that, because let's face it, right? You lead a business, and you've got a very successful business, but no one teaches you how to have awkward conversations, and they're expected of you when you lead a business. You have to have awkward conversations, but it's not something that's easily done. It's not something that comes natural to us. So I think that's really credible and really interesting to hear that you've actually recognised that and actually developed yourself in terms of the coaching element, to improve on that. And actually, it's really refreshing, I'm sure, for people watching, to hear someone like yourself doing that self-reflection and looking to improve. I think really, really good and positive to hear. And you, let's face it, if you give the enhanced version of yourself, then you're a better self for your employees and your company, aren't you? So yeah, no, good on you for that. It's, thank you. So if we look back, I'm sure hindsight's a great thing, right? But are you looking back and think, actually, you know, if I could go back and do things differently, would there be things that you would do differently?
Yeah, plenty. I mean, I think the big thing for me at school, I was always more English and English language and lit rather than maths. And I don't know if it's nature or nurture or what the cause might be, but I think a big area that I wasn't as good at kind of working in a team and recognizing and celebrating where you lack skills. So we set up without proper financial model, business model, thinking about things like profit margins, not a huge amount of awareness. In practical terms, you need to see it on deals, but not a huge amount of awareness on what EBITDA was and gross and net profit and all these sorts of things. So I think that was a big learning point. I think that's something that to this day we've had to kind of retrofit and think through and get right. So actually really taking that time to think about financial skills, what the plan is in very quantitative terms, was something that we could have done better with hindsight. At the same time, I think that you have to think of startup scale up business in phases. There's kind of there's a great book called Be More Pirate where it's talking about stage one is the swashbuckling pirate phase where it's not all perfect, it's not as you probably want to be, and it's almost surviving that and moving to more of a navy phase where it's a bit more structured and strategic, but then not losing your soul and culture. But I nonetheless, I do think we could have done a lot more to model and predict and have some ideas. I think the other thing that I'm sure you must see a lot with your clients is, and I'm not just saying because you're a recruitment agency, but is to really prioritize recruitment and to be braver about saying no to candidates. When you look at books like Tim Robbins, Good to Great, it's all about who comes on the bus and being really selective as to who comes on the bus. And actually, we've done that quite recently. A person just joined the business for a role that had been vacant for about a year or so, and the senior person that was recruiting for this role has really taken her time and been really fussy in a really positive way to make sure that the new joiner in a leadership position is the right fit, and it's an absolute knockout. He's fantastic, but it's been worth the wait. And so I think years ago, and again, it's hard in a startup because you're trying to keep the lights on, but I think really prioritizing recruitment, having framework analysis, if you've got any doubts, having the bravery to extend probation periods, all those sorts of things, you kind of learn through practice a little bit.
Yeah, completely agree with all of that. I think some really interesting points there, and obviously I can give a steer from a recruitment angle, but I do see, every day, we're trying to educate our clients as well and work with them to talk about that piece around getting things right. And when you're working from a cultural fit, not just from a skills fit, you teach skills, but getting the culture fit right, getting that person, it can really make or break a team. So completely understand where you're coming from there. So what if you could give advice now to someone starting up their own business, their own firm, and they're thinking, right, they've got all the hunger in the world, but what advice would you look to give to someone going through at the start of that journey?
Well, I think the first thing is there's two halves of the same coin. So there's never a perfect time. There's always a reason why you shouldn't start a business, and there's always a reason statistically and from naysayers why it's going to fail and why it won't work. And so on the one hand, you have to make a decision, get off the diving board, and accept it's not a perfect time. On the other hand, you have to really commit, in my view, and not really have a plan B, because otherwise, if you're sort of thinking about your plan B, watching the savings written down, you're not fully committed and you haven't given it a proper shot. So there's this almost slightly paradoxical element of waiting, getting it right, but actually having the bravery to jump and commit. And certainly our first year of trading, my mother-in-law, who we were really close to, passed away. My wife Ems was pregnant with our second. We had a young daughter. She broke her femur and had a kind of plaster cast up to her shoulder, and there were all sorts of reasons why it was a hideous year, and actually the reality, and put a lot of pressure on us, but the reality, as I'm sure it has at times for you and Natalie, but it's you can overthink and you can overtalk, and it's important to respect friends that are naysayers and actually lean into advice from cynics when it's helpful. But there won't ever be a perfect time, and but at the same time, I'd say bide your time, research, really think about what you're doing, and then when you go, fully commit.
Great advice. Great advice. Do you know what? The one slight thing I'll add on to that is that I think that was, some really, really good pointers. And I once met, when we started our business, we went to an accountant. I'll always remember the words of advice he gave me, because, you're going into the unknown. And he said, there might be 100 people that want to set up a business. And he says, but 99 of those people will get to that door and you don't know what's beyond that door. And he said, it's that 1 out of 100 that you push the door and you don't know no one knows. It's a scary place going into setting up your own business. But unless you walk through that door and give it your best shot, you'll never know. And actually, it was a very simple statement, but it really made me reflect. So I completely reiterate what you said there. I think that's some really good, really good tips there and advice. But sometimes, like you say, do the prep and go at it 100%, and then I think you're destined to make a success of it, aren't you? So would you say throughout your time of sort of entrepreneurship and Ignition Law, obviously it's a great success now, very reputable law firm in the city, but has there ever been, throughout your journey, there have been a real sort of light bulb moment where you thought, actually, hang on a minute, this is working, or I need to do this? Or
Yeah, I think so. In this year, I was talking about 2015, where there was a lot of stuff happening that was just brutal, and of course, you're not earning great money then at all. It's still a lot of reinvestment in the business to date. I'd say the light bulb really was getting to October, November, where I was certainly running on fumes, starting to physically fall to bits, and I've never been the biggest gym goer, but no sleep, stress, no real exercise, and actually started to do coaching in November 2015, and that was a really good step in a positive direction, and I started to draw a connection between physical and mental health. And I've not, touch wood, got any formally diagnosed mental health issues, but nonetheless you can tell where you're starting to not be your normal self, not sleeping well, you're not making the best decisions, and start to snap and things like that. So drawing that correlation between physical and mental health, learning to kind of hoist a white flag and work on the business rather than in the business, in terms of, say for me, it was a case of saying, look, I'm not the best at recruitment. I just see the best in people and want to be decisive and get them in straight away. And actually that led to kind of building a team, led to addressing the kind of slightly false economy of not having time to go to the gym, not having time to think strategically and do coaching sessions, to actually creating that time and moving the business forwards and starting to think of it in phases, and growth in that sense. I think the other light bulb moment is, and I'm sure you both have found the same, is actually behind most entrepreneurs are our family, is normally a really strong other half that's taking a lot of the weight and the slack, and actually that's massive. And realizing actually you're doing it as a team, and it's good to share these things, but possibly a bit too much. We still haven't quite got boundaries right of waking up in the morning and chatting about things, and so that's still a work in progress. But a light bulb moment was certainly the connection, physical and mental health, the connection with your spouse, and even kids, that actually taking them on the journey and saying that this is what we're doing, this is why we really believe in what we're doing as a business, and these are the kind of people we work with, and hopefully inspiring them, whether or not they want to do something similar, hopefully inspiring them to kind of make the right decisions for them in years to come.
I think that's a really really motivating point you've raised there, because, and I don't know about you, but I think the correlation between your working in the mental health and I think as years have gone by, as you've picked up on, I can also mirror that. And actually, I think when you become all engrossed with work, so you have your day-to-day job to do, running a business, your family, and I think as the business has gone on, it sounds like it's similar for you, but I've recognized times when actually months have gone by and I think, you know what, and there's flags here where I need to either step back and just have a couple of days off, or I need to I don't know whether that comes with age or experience or just time in business. But I think it's really important that you've noticed on that, you flagged that and you notice it and you know what to do now. And I too actually can mirror that, because very similar to myself, I get to a point where life and business can be all consuming, can't it? So you need to take a step back sometimes. And I suppose it's learning when the flags are to think, right, I need to step in and make sure I take that step back. So I'm the best version of me for my family, for the business, for everything, all concerned. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
I think it's that learning, the light bulb point of learning to create a vacuum sometimes. If you're taking that time off for yourself, and hopefully if you've got everything right, somebody will step up into that vacuum and surprise you and grow and develop and push their career forwards and the business forwards. I think that's a definite light bulb, is if you've got the right team, creating a vacuum sometimes is a really positive thing vis-a-vis micromanaging. If you haven't, it can be detrimental, and that tells you something else. But I think you're absolutely right.
So one final question, Alex, because I'm very conscious you've been very kindly given up your time today. But would you say, or has there been an inspiration? Who's been the biggest inspiration on your career, if there has been one?
Client-wise, and it's public on the website, I'd definitely say we're fortunate enough to work and support Bear Grylls and Rupert Tate and the team.
Amazing.
Bear Grylls Ventures, and I'd say, there's so many clients, to be fair, that I'd say we're incredibly values aligned. But just to showcase them and the great work they're doing, that they really are doing incredible things, from being chief scout through to championing some incredible causes and encouraging people to kind of look after their physical and mental health and get out there and do great things. But equally, they are a particular organisation, and I'd hope we'd mirror it in a very, very small way ourselves, where what you say you're doing and your brand and your brand values and the actual values in the organisation are, like a stick of rock, and I think that's really inspiring to. We're real believers in actually, in a people business, values are everything. Culture's what starts when the boss walks out the door and people talk. That's really the culture. Because you can't control it. That's the thing about
absolutely
policing these things. You create a vacuum, and if you've got the culture right and the people right, it does the rest. But I think they, in particular, as an organisation, really demonstrate that link between values and on the inside and on the outside.
What a great brand to be associated with. Absolutely. I think there's so much positivity out there in terms of the brand and the ethos of it. So what fantastic. Alex, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. You've given us some really useful insights, not only from a really positive standpoint around how successful you and your business have become, and it's great to see, but also that it's not always plain sailing, and sometimes we need to dust ourselves up and pick ourselves up and just keep going and just really keep trying and recognize when we need a bit of support. And not be afraid to reach out for that support. So it's really useful, I think, to hear from someone like yourself that sometimes we all need that bit of a push and a bit of extra support. But Alex, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and happy birthday, Jigsaw. I think you just had an anniversary.
We have, Alex. Yeah, we've just turned 8. So thank you for mentioning. Yeah, no, we have just turned 8. So yeah, thanks very much. Cheers, Alex.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Was that all right?